Chapter 1. Some days the sheer amount of enemies we attracted made me question if our crew was a little too trigger-happy, that maybe we'd pissed in too many pots without thinking of the consequences. But then I remembered most folks couldn't hold to a basic code of honor if it killed them. And kill them we did. Repeatedly. A droplet of sweat trickled down my back as I waited in the warehouse, my trusty pistol Matilda at my side. A couple of amber bulbs dangled from overhead, and the buffed floor glowed across the way to where Mordecai stood watch at the far end. Our resident shadow ward blended into the inky blackness to the point I had to squint to pick him apart from the shadows. We left Isabella herding the cats known as the crew on the Desire, and Jeff had joined us on this trip. The handsome man remained vigilant at the opposite side of the building, covered by rusted machinery and empty boxes. Out of anyone I'd met in the sea, sky, or land, there was no one I trusted more to have my back. Sabine and I waited in the middle as bait, out in the open. She stood a foot away in a caramel-colored corset and beige chemise, which begged for a couple of stains, and her perfectly curled hair remained pinned, not a strand out of place. She was supposed to be watching my back, but instead she picked at her nails. "Your fingers are all still there, girlie," I murmured, irritation besting me. "But they won't be if you don't keep your focus." Our search for Andreas Othman, and, by proxy, Seth, had been slow going over the past year. Not only did the man fly under the radar, but he could hide behind an entire company, most of whom didn't know the monster they reported to. Which brought us to Britain once more, to visit the two people who didn't hate us in this country. Viola managed to find us this lead, but even with her extensive reach, her contacts needed to show for us to make any headway. Already they were 5 minutes late. "When do we get to shoot something?" Sabine complained, her hand brushing over the piece at her side. Girl might whine now, but the couple of bounty drops she'd performed didn't classify her as a pro. Cracking shots at a paper target was land and air different from trying to fight a living, breathing enemy. "I'm sure if you asked politely, they'll come parading in for you to try." I shot back, wishing for all the world I didn't have to babysit. Somewhere up above, Captain Morris snickered at me. Payback for all the sass and vinegar I doled his way when I was her age. Not like I hadn't earned this tenfold. A rustling sound at the opposite end of the warehouse snared my attention. Mordecai blended into the shadows over there, but some more folks pushed the door open with a creak. They stepped in through the entrance, their silhouettes accented by the bright rays of a summer afternoon. Matilda was out and pointed their way before I sucked in another breath. "State your intentions, or we'll be peeling your bodies off the floor," I called out. A shot rang through the air coming from beside me. My jaw twitched. Sabine stood with her pistol aimed and her finger on the trigger, those manicured brows pulled together in fierce concentration. "Damn it, Sabine!" I hissed, shooting her a glare. "What happened to following my lead?" She stared at me with a familiar brand of insolence in those gray eyes, all while feigning innocence. "My finger slipped." My blood boiled, and I near had a conniption on the spot. 1,000 curses on girls with smart mouths and access to firepower. A string of expletives came from the door. "We're here for the rendezvous," a male voice called as our contact stepped into view. An older guy with a bit of a hunch lifted his hands in the air upon approach, his skin slicked with sweat and his shoulders heaving up and down. Behind him, the other two guys kept their guns aimed to match the way Matilda stared them down. Couldn't blame them. With Miss Jumps on the gun over here, they had no clue what they walked into. "Come on in," I called. "We won't shoot again." At that, I gave an arch look to Sabine, who attempted to appear far more blameless than she had any right to. The older man continued his approach, and the other two cast glances behind me to where Jeff stood on the other side of the warehouse. They still hadn't spotted Mordecai. Once our contact got close enough, I lowered Matilda and extended a hand. "B. Weston, captain of the Airship Desire."